check. Just waiting for the screen to come up.
Good morning and welcome to our So What But What If panel event. So we are joining you today from Stornoway on Lewis. So hopefully our signal will hold out. So the So What campaign is a gender-based approach to safety, and it's creating a safer future for younger generations. And this came about last November when Laura from Glasgow Girls Club, myself from One for Growth, and Ashley from Thriving Survivors came together to do a women's safety panel event. And it grew arms and legs, and we ended up having more questions and subjects to discuss than actually answering the questions. It was meant to be an hour's event. I think we got to 2.5 hours, and decided that one panel event was not going to be enough. We then worked with Clyde Radio to help them with their campaign. And then when 2022 came, we decided actually we're going to create a campaign that's going to last a year. So every single month we do a live panel event like this, and we cover subjects that generally can be uncomfortable to talk about, but are important within the safety campaign. It also switched from women's safety to safety in general this year, just because a lot of feedback we came back with it's what was needed rather than just women's safety. So we encompass everybody, and the main aim is to try and make things safer for youth in the future. Now what we do is at the end of every panel we ask everybody to give us their what if. So to give you a bit of explanation around the name, So What But What If came from a group of survivors, and they were fed up with being people saying, well, so what? You know, so what that you have to pretend to speak on your phone when you're walking home, so what, X, Y, and Z. And they were like, what if we just didn't have to do these things? What if we didn't need this campaign or any of the other amazing campaigns that are going on? So what we've tried to create is a platform to bring all safety campaigns together within Scotland. So throughout the year, every safety campaign will come together on this panel on individual subjects, but also at the end as a full safety campaign panel. And it's trying to bring all voices to one and create our list of what ifs. And we will then use that to create a paper that will go to the Scottish Government and then the UK Government with a collated list of asks to improve safety for our younger generations. So subjects that we cover are likes of perceptions, consent. We've got one coming up on sex workers. We've had online dangers and grooming. So it is subjects people don't necessarily feel comfortable talking, but it is conversations that need to be had in order to start breaking the stigmas. So this panel is our LGBTQIA+ panel, and this name has changed. It's changed. We first of all called this panel the Queer Panel when we put it out live to begin with at the start of the year. We know that there's younger generations that have taken that name and that terminology on board, but we did get feedback that it also was negative for other generations as well, and everyone has their different views on it. So we went back to, I suppose, the safe option of LGBTQIA+, but it did teach us that there's a lot of education that's missing. There's a gap there that needs to be filled, and that's where this panel, hopefully we can discuss it. And Maddie wrote us a great blog, which is on the Thriving Survivors website, everyone can have a look at, and it really breaks down what do each of the letters make, why it's important. It talks about pronouns as well, which is something that I myself can get wrong and get mixed up. So what we make really clear is that you can't make mistakes in this panel, you can't say the wrong thing, everything's open for discussion. And the fact that, you know, so we're both, let's go with mid-30s. And even in our generation, there's been so much, you know, advancement from when we were at school. You know, LGBT wasn't a thing when I was at school, it wasn't discussed. admits I'm from the sticks, but it just wasn't discussed at all. So even in a short space of time, we have come on a long way, and there are lots of discussions to be had and to take away the, the difficulty or the nervousness of actually talking to people and saying the right thing and the fear of saying the wrong thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yes, that's enough from me. That's a bit of background on the campaign and what we're going to be discussing today. And now it's over to you.
So we have got a fabulous panel involved today to chat to us more about the LGBTQIA community plus. So we're just going to do it round the table, round the room. And if you could each introduce yourself, guys, that would be absolutely fabulous. So we're going to start with Maddie. We're going to work round this way.
Hey, hi everyone. My name's Maddie. I've actually been on a few of these panels before, so I'm excited to be back and to meet all of you. So I'm non-binary and pansexual, and at the moment I've kind of been working as a writer and researcher, and I'll be starting my PhD in English literature in autumn. And yeah, I'm really keen to talk about this. I have some big topics to bring up, so yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Brilliant. Thanks for being here, Maddie. Okay, Edward.
My name is Edward. I don't know what to say. I'm glad I'm here because, and I'm glad you said what you said about, I was terrified because I feel kind of ancient sometimes. I don't know if it's that, even though I'm gay, I've got the kind of male privilege going on. So I've got that and I'm very aware of that. So I try to just better myself constantly. So I'm glad you said if we make mistakes, it's a safe space, because I'm terrified I say something that isn't appropriate. But I don't think I will, but just that way, I suppose I was overthinking it, but it's nice to be here and I'm excited to discuss and mostly to listen, I think, rather than put my tuppence worth in. I want to be educated more so.
Brilliant, Edward. Thank you. Amazing. Okay, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie and I'm a cis female, she/her, pansexual woman. I'm a tattoo artist on my own studio, very proudly LGBTQ plus studio, with my business partner who's also pansexual. And yeah, I was really nervous about coming, but I think when I want to learn is because I actually deal a lot with very young 18 to 24-year-olds. People who identify across the lovely rainbow, and yeah, I think it's important that we talk about them, and because they are the future, so I'm excited to chat and learn.
Brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. Amazing. Sheila.
Hi there. My name's Sheila. I'm flying the flag actually probably for the older generation. I would have been aware that I was attracted to women in the 70s. That far back, and I came out in the 80s during the time that Section 28 was prevalent. That affected my work as a social worker. I now work as a social worker and a coach. I'm not sure I identify as anything. I'm a woman who happens to be romantically inclined to having relationships with other women, and I probably don't like labels. I see the use of them being very useful in order to educate people right now, and make them aware that there are differences and we're not all the same. But yeah, that's kind of me at present.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sheila. Okay, and Elijah.
Hi, I'm Elijah and I'm a gay non-binary trans man and I use he, they pronouns.
Fabulous. What an amazing panel. And I loved how you said, Debbie, identify with the colours of the lovely rainbow. I think that was a really nice way of putting it.
Because that's what it is, Yep. So.
I think it's worth actually saying as well, we do have a youth panel as well, which Elijah is part of. So what we do is after each of these panels, we were aware that when we are doing a campaign for the younger generation, we might not necessarily be in that category anymore. And our panelists aren't always in that category. So we then, the Elijah and Rebecca and Olivia then watch the panels back, and from a youth point of view, give their view on it as well, like a kind of almost a goggle box, which is really interesting to compare what we're saying and what they say as well. So Elijah's part of that as well.
So before we get into, obviously the focus of these panel events is on safety, but before we get into our kind of chats around that, I thought it would be good to revisit this, you know, the queer chat that Heather had started, because we were having a really interesting conversation before we went live, and Maddie, you gave us some other letters as well, so I thought that would be great just to kind of have a quick chat about that and see how we're all feeling about that. So Maddie, you lead the way on that.
Yes, sorry to bring more letters into the mix, but it can be helpful. It's just, I think because we have a language that is not built around including us and is often built to exclude us, it can be difficult to settle on words that are appropriate, that include everybody. But what I have come across recently, which I think is helpful, partly because when I'm speaking, I feel like I'm going to stumble over LGBTQIA+, if I have to say that every time. So I've heard GRSM, which means gender, romantic and sexual minorities. So I think I'm going to say that from now on. The only criticism I've heard of it is that some intersex people feel that it doesn't include them. But I think we can maybe double up on the meaning of sexual to mean like sexual orientation, but also sexual as in like binary, non-binary sex as well. So yes, I don't know. Any thoughts about that as a term?
Sheila, what do you think about that? Because obviously you've said, you know, you're not a label person, which is actually, would it be, we'll come on to it after, but one of my what ifs is about labels and what if they're not needed.
Yeah, I guess labels, as I say, I understand their functionality, but I guess inclusion and I think tolerance is the wrong word sometimes, because tolerance is like you're almost putting up with someone. Mm-hmm. Acceptance, you don't need to, I mean, nobody needs to accept me, and I don't need people's acceptance. I just am. I think there are so many differences in the world. And I suppose I even realise that even more now that I work with young people who are not neurotypical. So I think the landscape of difference, whether it be race, sexuality, gender identity, neurology or whatever, I can see that this isn't just confined to our community. It could kind of spread and get kind of really confusing, but I respect those who want to kind of take that forward in order to kind of promote awareness amongst people of all the differences. I just think there's an awful lot of other areas where it would be useful too.
Definitely. I think you know, when we were naming the panel, and then it was just like, we don't know what all these letters mean, we don't know where they sit. Wouldn't it just be easier if people could just be and not have to go, right, if we missed a letter out, like you say, Maddie? It's a bit of a mouthful, and in my opinion it just shouldn't need to, we shouldn't need all these letters, we should just be. So I'm just I've got questions on this one subject. Elijah, obviously you're on our youth panel, so we've talked obviously about how for us this is all new, but in your generation, was it clear? Has it always been clear what, you know, the letters are, the different terminologies are?
I mean, I think for me, I had a kind of unique experience kind of growing up, you know, kind of being online. And that's kind of where a lot of these labels kind of accumulated. A lot of these labels and the letters of the LGBTQIA+ community kind of, you know, came about because people were kind of sharing their experiences, and kind of language kind of developed. If you go back to the days of like early Tumblr, I know a lot of things originated there, like a lot of pride flags, a lot of labels. And I think that, you know, when I came out as trans, I didn't quite know all these things, you know, because I was never taught in school. I was never taught until I kind of took the leap and educated myself. But I kind of always knew about, you know, like gay people and stuff, being on the internet and seeing like a lot of people, but never really realizing that like I could be transgender until I met another transgender person of my age. And I think that's, you know, a lot of the labels are important because it brings people together and helps people to understand each other. And I think for me, labels are important because it's not just, you know, oh, I have this label because it helps me understand myself, but it also helps to understand other people. And, you know, we have communities of different people that, you know, can kind of mix together, and you can be like, oh, I'm trans, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that. And you kind of are like, okay, so you have this experience, I have this experience. And it opens up realm of conversation more, I think. But that's maybe unique to my generation because we, you know, we are the age of the internet and it's around us all the time. You know, like all of my friends are like, pretty much all of them are gay or, you know, like trans in some way. So it's like I'm kind of in a very unique setting where I've kind of got all that around me all the time. So it's very normal to me to have all these different labels. And even like myself, I don't use I'm a non-binary trans man, which is confusing for a lot of people just to say that. I understand. That's why I usually just say I'm a trans man for the most part. You know, I just go by he, they mostly to kind of appease people that are confused. But I kind of realized that that's not really where I want to be. I want to be able to, you know, have my labels and, you know, do what I do, like, without, you know, having to confuse other people, which is why education, I think, is important about these labels.
Yeah, 100%.
Can I say something again here? That's really interesting, Elijah, because I came out when there wasn't internet, most obviously, but also I didn't know what gay was. I knew I was attracted to women. Maybe that's around the identity. I knew I was there were no role models. There were rumours about Joan Armatrading and Valerie Singleton on Blue Peter, and that was about all. The only role models of male would be John Inman and Larry Grayson, seriously. And there was no mention in any published kind of thing that was freely available of kind of homosexuality, basically.
You know, it's interesting because, like, I've got a 10-year-old daughter and she knows all of it. She knows. They're taught in school now, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
She knows what all the letters mean. She's far more clued up than I was. And actually, it was brilliant to see how far it's come. And she's educated me prepping for this panel a lot more than, you know, like I thought a 10-year-old would know, which is great. Right, on to your next
fabulous
question.
Okay, so let's get into chatting about safety then, if we can work our way around the room again and just find out from you, have you ever experienced like feeling unsafe, and from the time that you first came out as well to the time now? So have we progressed with that feeling unsafe if you're out and about, or like for being who you are? So let's work our way. Right, Maddie, you go first.
So I thought about this question, and I could talk about the times where I've experienced harassment or assault, but I don't really want to talk about that because at the moment, what's making me feel unsafe is the fact that across the Atlantic in the US, our bodies are being regulated and legislated and criminalized. And I think that structural oppression is what makes me feel unsafe psychologically. And it makes me worry for the future because it's not just about reproductive rights, it's about who has access to safe and inclusive healthcare, and healthcare that respects people's bodily autonomy. So when we're kind of talking about these issues, and these are huge topics and they're scary, we need to be forming alliances. Anyone who tries to pit women's rights against trans rights are unfortunately misinformed. We all need to have our bodily autonomy respected, and we rely on healthcare systems, and we need them to be safe and inclusive. So that's what's making me feel unsafe right now. I know it's happening in the US and it's not happening here, but the US is very influential culturally, has a huge military. You know, I think I'm getting a little bit tired of people gaslighting me into saying this isn't a problem. I am concerned. And I think we need to really rally around this politically. I think we need to write to MPs and say, look, we need access to healthcare, and also, you know, be vocal about it essentially, and really come together and have a kind of feminist alliance to talk about these issues. And I think that that kind of structural violence and oppression is what is my kind of biggest concern right now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? Because what happens in one country is felt globally. So yeah, that you raise a really, really good point there, Maddie. Okay, Edward, what about you in terms of feeling unsafe, maybe when you first came out to now? Like, how do you feel that society's come on for you?
Well, it's amazing for me, for gay men, I think. Like Sheila said, who did you say? John Inman and
Larry Grayson.
Larry Grayson. I mean, they're idols to me. I just love them. I think they're amazing. But I didn't feel safe if the word gay was mentioned in my company, because I thought everybody was looking at me because they all knew. So, and there was just a lot of shame attached to being gay when I was younger. And look, I feel as if I'm like Sheila. I was obsessed with women in the 70s, but there were Charlie's Angels and Wonder Woman. They were my idols, and then I started realizing that I liked men, and I think I was about 8. So I always felt shame around the word gay, or if it was on television, and I suppose that made me feel unsafe. I remember being like in primary 7 or primary 6, and I saw 2 guys that I went to school with, and I waved to them like that. And on the Monday, they were like, "But you wave like a poof. What are you doing that for?" And I just was like, even now, I'm quite self-conscious how I wave, but I don't actually. I just give it like that. I just fully embrace my sissiness, and I wave like I don't care. But it's yeah, I think I've always tippy-toed around things, and even been at a party one night, and guys must have knew I was gay, must have sensed I was gay, and they asked me, and I said no, I wasn't, because I was scared in case I get beat up. So I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of myself for not speaking my truth. But in that moment, I had to do what I felt was right to keep myself safe. But now I just feel, thankfully, I mean, this is why LGBT, we're talking about all the letters. I'm dyslexic, so I really struggle with it. But I think it's important, and I could be selfish and say it doesn't really matter, but I'm very lucky because the way gay men are represented in the media and television now is celebrated. You know, yeah. I am a performer and a host events, and it's mainly straight couples that go to these events, and straight women, and I feel completely safe to be as flamboyant and as white, you know, as camp as possible. So I feel now, I feel very safe now, whereas maybe years ago I didn't feel safe. But I think that's the media, and like Maddie's saying about things happening in America, the media is such a big influence on us. And if you're watching something that's happening in America, the way your brain works, you get into that fight or flight or freeze mode when you're watching that, and you do have stress. And even though it's happening in America, you still wonder, could it happen here? I mean, when you hear about things, the gay men being treated in Russia, that terrifies me, because it's not here, but it's scary to see that gay men don't have any rights in Russia, but because it's me that's, you know, as I identify with that. So yeah, I'm rambling on now, but I do feel safe now in my own country. I'm going to America, and I'm going solo traveling, and I know I'm going to be safe there, because America's quite embracing gay men, especially New York, maybe not other parts of America, but New York is anyway. So yeah, I feel safe.
Okay, thank you for that, Edward. And Sheila, what about you in terms of your feelings of safety from the time that you came out to where we are in today's society?
I was thinking of a few, I'll skirt over some of them, but I was thinking of a few occasions when I felt unsafe. Such was the atmosphere in the 80s with Section 28, with being out as a woman. That in my second relationship, I happened to be going out with somebody who was a minister's daughter who hadn't told her parents, and my first partner blackmailed me for money. Because she was going to tell her parents that she was gay, and in order to protect her, I paid quite a lot of money over. So I guess I didn't feel safe from one of my own community then, but that was the whole shame that was just existing at that point. There was also a political agenda of Section 28, which affected me greatly at work. I do remember a physical thing about being unsafe when a rather aggressive client in his own house put me up against the wall by my throat and called me an effing lesbian. I was quite pleased with how I got out of it. I said, I thought you'd be more, he was a Rangers supporter, and unfortunately, I said, I thought you'd be more bothered that I support Celtic. And he let me go and release, and he took me off the wall. And I got out of there sharpish. But that was an environment I had to go into. I didn't look straight. I didn't want to kind of identify as kind of lesbian, but it's just the way I presented, short hair and the clothes I wore, that it was obvious I wasn't very kind of traditionally feminine looking. But the other one that affected me more was when I was a deputy in a children's home, and the children's home had 12 young people aged 12 to 18. And we had a couple of young people who were 17 and a half and just about to leave being accommodated by the local authority. And particularly one young woman who seemed to identify with me quite a lot. And she showed me a lot of attention. I would say she probably had a crush on me. And I remember feeling absolutely paranoid in the environment of Section 28 that I was being seen to promote homosexuality. I feel rather bad that, I mean, the kids, once they knew you a lot, would come in and put their arm around you like this or whatever. I would freeze. I feel sorry that I couldn't be very natural with her, but I was very aware of, I didn't want to be seen to be encouraging anything, because although I hadn't come out to work, I think it was pretty obvious that I was gay. It just wasn't spoken about. But I felt very, very vulnerable at that point. And I suppose opening the conversation out about safety and being yourself, there was a real thing about fashion and what you wore. I came out at a time through the Women's Centre in Miller Street, and I actually remember women being castigated for wearing lipstick or looking too feminine at that point, because you had to look a certain way when you were lesbian, and I never felt comfortable about that. I'm kind of sporty. I kind of prefer jeans and t-shirts anyway, but I didn't want. I feel at certain times people have typecast my look as being butch or femme or whatever. And I, just as I said at the beginning, I would like to exist on the whole spectrum of everything that I can be. So if I want to dress up, I don't know, leather jacket and motorcycle boots, which I've got, then I want that to be the case. If I want to wear a dress and look different, then I want that to be the case. And I think there's more liberty to do that now. But before, even in my own community, it didn't seem as if there was that kind of freedom to make a choice. So.
Sheila, you've mentioned Section 28 a couple of times. I think it would be really good if you could give us a bit more information on that for anybody that isn't sure of what that is.
Yes, Section 28 was dreamt up by dear old Margaret Thatcher, and it basically outlawed the promotion of homosexuality. I think it was left kind of quite vague. In some ways, it didn't specify how it could be promoted, but there were various, obviously, if you were working with young people in schools, funding was withdrawn for arts programs that were seen to kind of cross a line of decency or whatever and be promoting homosexuality. So, as I say, the vagueness probably let minds run away with themselves and think, oh God, what am I doing? But basically there was this kind of there was this kind of atmosphere and during that era, that to be seen to promote homosexuality was against the law.
Yeah, and it was in England, it was from 88 to 2000, but in Scotland it lasted longer to 2003, which is quite interesting. So it's not that old either. It's and I think that kind of comes back to our discussion about the fact that, you know, things have moved on quite quickly.
Thank goodness from that, 100%. Okay, Elijah, so what about you? How do you feel with regards to your levels of safety from when you first came out to to now, even though that's maybe not such a long period?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what Sheila and Edward have said, because I think it's definitely a different point of view, because you guys have been through a lot more than maybe I've gone through in terms of sexuality, and I think that it's probably seems like a much more jarring change, but I want to kind of counter it with my experience of I still don't feel safe, and I feel like we've still got so much progress to make. And right now in the UK with trans rights, I don't feel protected, I don't feel safe. I think that we are going to continue to be targeted, particularly by exclusionists and like TERFs, trans radically I messed that up. Basically feminists who don't like trans people, because particularly trans women, because they believe that we're infringing on their rights, which is just not it. It's just not true. But because of people like I'm a name and shame J.K. Rowling here, because I think she needs to be put in her place a little bit. She really attacks trans people for simply existing and saying, like, we're all predators and we're trying to infringe on women's rights. And also something that she said that I find really funny, because I'm a gay trans man and non-binary as well, is that she said that trans people are trying to escape homophobia by being trans. And it's like, well, why do I exist then? Just to prove you're wrong, But I think that with people like her, she has a lot of influence, and people in governments as well not taking our issues seriously. I don't feel safe. My mum worries for me whenever I walk out the door, and there was a time where I was on a train home and there was a drunk guy talking to me and he misgendered me, but I wasn't going to, correct him. Like Edward brought up, it's about your own interest of safety. I wished I could have said, actually, I go by he, him, he, they pronouns, but in the interest of my safety, because I didn't know his, views, or if he was going to, be like, he was really nice. He wasn't like a mean person. He wasn't being like weird to me. He was being nice, but it could have changed in an instant if I had brought up the fact that I was different. And that's the thing, is that you walk down the street and people stare at you because you're different, and I've always been different. And so I think that I've got built up quite a resilience to it, but it still scares me, because it's like we've come such a long way, but there's still such a long way to go, and I don't want people to get too comfortable. I don't want people to say, oh yeah, I feel safe, that's it. There's no more needs to be done, because if you feel safe, that's great. Help out other people to feel safe, because that's what we need. We need other people who do feel comfortable and feel confident and have a voice to speak out on our behalf and with us, to kind of emphasize the issues that we have. Because it's like, only recently they were discussing banning conversion therapy in the UK, and they excluded trans people from that. And Boris Johnson said, I don't think that children should be transgender. And it's like, you can't, it's okay, but don't bring your own beliefs into that, because this is about banning conversion therapy. It's not about your own beliefs. And so that's, he was our prime minister. I know he's resigned now, but he was our prime minister. And it's like, how are we supposed to feel safe when the people that are supposed to keep us safe are actively not keeping us safe?
I saw Boris Johnson's reaction to that when he was asked about excluding trans people from that bill, and he gave the argument of, well, we need to consider women's safety, as if he's ever given a single care about women's safety before this point. I think we need to be really skeptical of people who use that argument, because they use feminism as a stick to beat trans people with. And we need to be weary, because they don't have women's interests at heart.
Absolutely. And I think that, feminism isn't feminism if it doesn't include, people of color and trans people. Like, we're all feminism's about including everyone, so why are we being excluded? And it's like, to people like J.K. Rowling who are afraid of trans women, you're not afraid of trans women, you're afraid of men. You're afraid of cis men infringing on your rights, because it's cis men that are taking away your rights. This isn't us versus women, it's us and women versus cis men who are in power, who are not taking our issues seriously. So it's like, how can, if women don't feel safe, how can we feel safe? Because we're fighting the same battle, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, we need to band together for that. And, you know, we've come such a long way, you know, with gay rights. I feel like being gay is a lot more accepted in today's society. But even still, I know people who, if you know, told them you were gay, they'd probably laugh at you and call you slurs. That still happens.
Yeah.
And particularly for, you know, as trans people, it's always a fear that you're going to get called a slur. You're going to get, you know, I've had friends who have been egged in Edinburgh, just to put it into context. And, you know, I had someone say to me, a friend who lives in Texas who's trans, and said, you know, oh, I might move to the UK. And I had to say, look, don't, because from one trans person to another, it's not safe. I don't feel safe. And I know it's not safe where you are, but it's not safe here either. And that's, you know, that's what's worrying, that I had to say to my friends, you can't move here because I'm afraid they're going to take away our rights. You know,
There's been trans people who've managed to seek asylum, moving away from the UK, managed to seek asylum in other countries because they're trans, because they've been so discriminated against.
Absolutely.
Harassed. Yeah.
And this isn't even touching on, you know, trans healthcare, which is another thing I could speak about for hours. But to put into context, I was referred to an NHS gender clinic in May of 2019, and I haven't even been seen for a first appointment yet.
Wow. Okay. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
A long way to go. Okay, well, that was some really interesting points there. Debbie, what about yourself in terms of, have you ever had experiences of feeling unsafe, you know, from when you maybe first came out as pansexual to now? Do you feel as though society's got better for you in terms of how you feel?
This is a bit of a strange one for me because I'm totally aware of my privilege. If you look at me, I'm very femme. So if you see me in the streets, it's a totally different thing, you know, and I'm with a man, so, and a cis man, so it's a totally different thing. But obviously I had the same, I think it's the same young people experience, like in school, people in my school seen me with a woman. So, well, I say women, we were kids, we were girls at the time, and it was the whole like bullying and saying that I shouldn't be allowed to get changed with them for gym anymore, and you know, all the usual, like picking on me. And I was bullied anyway in school because I looked different. So it was like one or the other. You never really knew which one it was. But back then I identified as bisexual, but that term no longer sat right with me, especially with things like the LGBT Alliance and things like that, like we touched on.
I think Debbie might have froze. She might come back.
We'll carry on, and if
carry
Debbie
on.
comes back, you can continue on. Debbie, if you can hear us, maybe log off and log back in so we can reconnect you.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, I'm back. Oh, sorry.
There we go.
You're back.
I don't know yes. Did I cut off for ages, or was that?
Yeah,
You
we
were telling
got.
about your
Yeah,
experience in school.
Oh,
And
right.
how-
Okay.
And you had identified as bisexual, and then you decided
Yes.
that you didn't
So,
feel that.
and also, if I met a man or a boy at the time, they would sexualise that, and it was horrible, especially because I looked femme. And I actually just didn't want, if there was a long time where I didn't tell anyone anything because I didn't want sexualised, I didn't want men to go prove it then, or other horrible things. And also found a lot of the same stuff that Sheila touched on in the queer community or the LGBTQIA plus community. I was raised a lot by women because they would look at me and go, you look straight. Because back then it was like that, you know, so men were laughing at me, women were laughing at me. So I just ended up, I shut down with it. And when I started to learn about pansexuality, I felt really comfortable again, you know, and I started to feel like a bad person because I was getting to live in the shadows by looking femme and not being part of it. And I think we touched on that as well, that maybe that's why all the letters are important, because as much as I'm okay, I feel a duty of care. Like, you can be gay or bi or pan, but you still also need to be an ally to everyone else, you know, and I feel like that's important, and that's why I need to speak my truth to people. And since then it's became very important to me, you know, that I don't allow that to happen. And obviously I've got bi friends who think the same as me. They don't see gender, they don't pre-decide genitals, something I find strange. So I'm not erasing bisexual people at all or saying that they are excluding trans people, because that's not the case. Just for me personally, I didn't feel comfortable with the term anymore, you know. So yeah, I feel safer now, but obviously I'm aware that young people don't, and it's the same story. I have 18-year-olds coming in here and they're going through the same stuff that we went through, you know, so it's not enough, you know.
Can I ask a question that's not on the prepped list of questions, but more discussion point just from listening to all of your points? Is that, do you think that younger people are more targeted than, say, older generations? Or is it more that as we grow older and we grow through experiences, we become a bit more long in the tooth thinking? Or is it, do you think that it's not just, there's not just, you know, there's gay, there's now all these different categories, so to speak, as well, and there's that lack of education. And I think some people, particularly, I don't want to pick on cis men at all, but that there is that lack of education, and therefore not knowing, it's for them, there's that insecurity, and it's easier to pick on people that are maybe they don't know. So do you think it's an age thing? Do you think it's or what's your thoughts on that? Because that's a bit that's coming up for me when everyone's talking, is that actually the older generations within the panel feel a lot safer now, but is that because of your age and experiences, or is it because there's more to deal with now and people don't understand?
I think
oh, sorry, Edward, on you go.
I think it's a bit mixture of both, but I think because I am gay and Sheila is a lesbian, that they're kind of clear cut. You know, being trans and non-binary is confusing to people now because we don't have enough education on it. We don't see it being represented positively in the media, not that I'm aware of anyway. So that's what needs to happen, because it's okay because people accept. You know, if a 14-year-old boy would get and say to his mum and dad, I'm gay, there's a bigger chance they're going to accept it than if they say that I'm trans. They're going to be confused at that because they don't know enough about it. That's where the unsafetyness comes in for young people, because there's not enough understanding about what they're identifying with. Even me, I was with my nephew and niece last week, and they were educating me. I was down at London Pride in London, and it was just amazing, but very emotional as well, because it was 50 years of Pride, but just so many different people, and it was great. My nephew and niece were educating me, so I think us older people need to be more educated.
Yeah.
I really relate to Debbie's experience as well, as someone who's pansexual and also used to identify as bisexual. We both had a similar journey. But my parents are very pro LGBT, and they understand the trans stuff quite well, as long as it's binary trans, so people who identify as either a man or a woman. But the pansexual stuff, the non-binary stuff, they just didn't get it, and their reaction to it was quite hostile, which really surprised me, because, you know, they support marriage equality, all of these things, but when I came out to them, initially I came out to them as bisexual, they said things to me like, why are you telling us who you have sex with? We don't want to know that. And it was very jarring experience for me, because I thought I was in a safe environment to tell them that. And it's been a really long journey. I mean, that was 10 years ago now. And my partner is non-binary as well. And I had to basically explain that to them, and they refused to use their pronouns. They really didn't get it. They made kind of snide comments about it. And I had to just keep sending them resources and be like, look, this is about respect. This is about, I don't need you to understand it fully. But if you want my partner to feel welcome in our family, you need to use their pronouns, and you need to, you know, it's like using the wrong name for someone. It's about respect, and I have actually, thankfully, there's a positive outcome to this. They have started using their pronouns. They've come a long way, but it's difficult when you're in those kind of almost in between identities, or those identities that aren't more well known, like gay or lesbian. And I think that's another reason why it is maybe important to have labels. But I would also like a culture where you can change your labels, and that's fine. You know, like I at one point did identify as a lesbian. Now I don't even identify as a woman. Do you know what I mean? And it's taken me time to really learn that about myself. And I think it's difficult because I think it's easier for cisgendered heterosexual people to believe that gayness or non-binariness or our gender is innate. I'm not so convinced about that. I think we're all born babies. We're not born men and women, and we become who we are over time. And some of that will be our personality, some of that will be external factors and about visibility for the LGBT community and all of these factors. So I think we need a bit more flexibility, a little bit more understanding. Labels are important, but they can change, and we shouldn't say, well, I thought you were straight or I thought you were gay. Just like let people explore in a safe way. I would really like that kind of culture to be more prevalent.
I think that makes perfect sense, because if you just think of people in general, we change and develop as we grow as well. So do you know, why should anything else be any different?
Exactly.
I would like to jump in on what Maddie said, if that's okay. And I would like to say that I think as well, with people being trans and non-binary, it's change. We symbolize progress and change, and a lot of people don't like that. And that's why I think it's easier for, like Sheila and Edward now, because, identifying as gay or lesbian or not identifying at all, it for you, it's what people are more used to, because you've been around for so long and you've been trailblazing for the rest of us. And it's like, I didn't mean that as in you're old, I meant like your generation in general, but you guys have been trailblazing for us, and it's like you've really paved the way for particularly, like people who have different sexualities, like, people who are lesbian and gay, and even people who are, bisexual and pansexual, as much as there's still a lot of phobia around those, like biphobia is still very much a thing. It's becoming a bit more normalized now because you guys are there, you guys are the voices, you guys have been doing it for us for decades, and I just want to thank you guys for your hard work in that and just being your authentic selves and really pushing for that. But I think, for us as trans people, it's very much, we represent the change that people are scared of, and people don't want to accept it because it means they have to dismantle all their previous ideas and readjust. And we're easier targets as well because we don't fight back the same. And particularly trans people, because we're such a minority, we can't just stand up and be like, that's wrong, and then be like, okay, sorry, I was wrong, and then everything be okay, because they're gonna fight back at us, and then they're gonna bring their friends into it. It's like 1 against 10 every single time. That's how it feels, and I think that as well as, changing labels, I'm gonna tell you my experience, because I came out as bisexual when I was still identifying as a woman back in high school, and my parents were totally cool with it, totally fine with that. I think I even came out as a lesbian for like a week at one point, and then very quickly realized that that was not correct, because I very much, I'm a gay non-binary man. I very much like men, but I think it was craving that kind of queer love, that kind of gay love that I couldn't quite figure out because my gender wasn't matching. And so when I eventually kind of, came out as trans, I was bisexual for a while, I was pansexual, I came out as agender and genderqueer before coming out as a trans man, and now I'm non-binary. So it's like, it's like my labels have changed so much, and I think it's totally okay to do that. And I think that people just need to accept that we change and we grow, and gender and sexuality can be fluid for a lot of people. It is for me, like, as much as, I might identify as a non-binary trans man, that's fluid for me. I might not be a woman, but in those identities, it's kind of, it changes. And it's like, I'm very much aware that my sexuality might develop, and I might, maybe be attracted to, women at some point, but it's very unlikely. Most of the people I am attracted to are, you know, men or non-binary people, because, you know, non-binary people are absolutely included in my identity too. And I think that's something that's important to mention, is that even in gay identities, non-binary people are included in that, if they so want to be, of course. No.
It's really interesting.
Really interesting. So guys, this has been such an interesting discussion. I've super learned from it as well. And obviously the last question, we've kind of all been touching on it anyway. What does society need to do better, you know, for the younger generations? We've been hearing that we need to we need to be allies for each other. We need to speak up for different people. Is there anything else to add to that as well, just before we move to our what ifs? What else can we do? I think education is so important. I think educating the younger generations, but every generation actually.
I think older generations need more education than the younger ones. Going from like what Edward's saying, and my daughter, and they're getting educated early on.
That's
now,
good. That's good.
But it's the older stigmas that are stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, to expand on what Heather's saying, like that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, education for young people is fine, but those young people go home at night, and if the home environment is toxic or homophobic or whatever, then that's going to unravel, because when you're very young, you listen to your parents. So what can we do about that? And I was thinking about this quite a lot, and also I think it's okay to say kids, there could be gay people, there could be straight people, but I think there should be people talking about like this, like their experience, like how hard it's been, how horrible it is, how upsetting it is to be treated this way, you know. And I think that needs to be brought into education, but I think parents need to be included, you know. And I know we all learn from young people, we all learn from younger people, and I try and listen as much as I can, because I'm the same age as you, and it's so many people my age, their minds are closing, and I just don't want to be like that, you know. So I think the education, we have to include parents in it. The kids aren't enough. Parents and caregivers, sorry, and caregivers, not just parents.
That's a really good point.
My daughter asked me a question actually, and I was just like, wow, it's like so open-minded and so curious. And she said to me, we were out for dinner and one of our friends was there. And she's like, it was Ed, that's Ed. And she said, so last year Ed was Olivia, but it's Ed now. I was like, that's brilliant. And she's just like, why are you so like shocked with it? And I was like, just because that wouldn't have been an option when I was in school, I think it's amazing you just accepted it, and there's no question around it. She just didn't flinch. And we're walking home and she asked me, Mum, if Ed gets a girlfriend, would Ed be a lesbian? And I was like, that's such an educated question. But she was just curious. And I was like, I don't know, I suppose biologically, yes, but I said, I would just call them a couple. But I was just like, actually, the younger generation are far more switched on and open to asking questions than we are. And I was totally thrown. I was like, it's a really good question, you know? So I think it is older generations. And when I've been talking for the last 3 or 4 months about this panel, I've mentioned so many times about Maddie, the blog you wrote, and so many people want to read it because they just don't know. So yeah, I think that education for, you know, parents and older generations is definitely key.
And sorry, can I just come in here, because this is such an important point and I did want to bring it up. I'm glad it's come up. But having a gender affirming household or a supportive household saves lives. I've read a stat, it was from a 2016 study, and it showed that LGBTQ youth whose families affirm their gender identity and sexual orientation are almost 50% less likely to make an attempt to end their own life. So obviously this is a huge problem for young people who are LGBTQ plus, it's suicide and addiction and homelessness as well. But in Scotland, 24% of young homeless people are LGBT. So if we can foster that acceptance, it will save lives.
And that's quite a big point to take away. Yeah, that's a big point. Yeah. So I know, like for me, do you know what, coming out of this, the major thing is, so I was thinking at the start, we shouldn't need labels. We shouldn't require labels. We should just be able to be. But actually, it's an education for me that actually labels do have their place and they can be important, but everyone has to do what is right for them. And I never even considered that whole, you know, development of labels, so to speak, and learning as you go as well. So that's something that I've taken away from this, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know we've not touched much on the sort of transgender, the medical care thing, but I actually think that's a massive discussion that could be a whole other point.
Yeah.
And where we have 3 minutes. So
I mean, I would be happy to do another panel on it. I could talk for hours about it.
well, I'm going to hold you to that one.
We'll do that, Elijah. Okay, guys, well, this has been great. I think with every panel, they could go on for longer, but hopefully anyone watching this, you know, this will be a catalyst for conversations for other people watching this in their households and with their friends and families as well. But let's end and go round the room with what is your what if? Okay, so we'll start with you, Maddie.
Right. My what if? What if our rights were no longer a debate, but a guarantee?
Good. Love it. Debbie?
What if we didn't need to come out anymore?
Yes.
Love it. Edward?
What if, because you know I like mindfulness, what if everybody knew how to be mindful? Because in that there's non-judgment, there's acceptance, there's trust, there's patience, there's kindness, and there's gratitude. So what if everybody knew how to be mindful? Because I think if we did, we'd be kinder people to ourselves and to other people.
Yes.
Like it, love it. Okay, brilliant. Sheila?
What if the only business I had to ask about your life was to make sure that you're safe and you're okay, and other than that, how you live your life is your choice, and I respect that.
Love it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, and Elijah?
I think my what if is, what if we can, you know, go out and live our lives without being fearful, with our rights, you know, like Maddie said, being guaranteed and not being debated, and have access to the tools and the information that we need, but, you know, for everyone to have those tools and information, and for us to have, you know, better healthcare for trans people, better education for not just LGBT people, but cis people as well, and just everyone be inclusive and included in the conversation, and everyone be, you know, kind of more knowledgeable, and everyone to feel safer.
Love it. What amazing what ifs.
I know, they're really good.
Well,
Brilliant.
Can I just add one wee thing? If anyone's watching and does need some advice, like LGBT Youth Scotland are a great charity. So if you have a young person or you are a younger person who needs a bit, like, give them a call. They're a great charity. That's all. I just wanted someone to have access to something at this stage if they're watching.
No, that's brilliant, Debbie.
Definitely. And to add to that as well, Thriving Survivors, who's part of this campaign as well, they're there if anyone needs to talk about anything. Never ever feel you're on your own, because you're 100% not. So we have these panel events on the third Friday of every month. So we've got 3 more to go, and then we've got our live event on the 9th of December. So if everyone keeps that date free, we will be having a big party to end this year-long campaign, and that'll be in Glasgow, and everybody's welcome. We've got some really interesting subjects coming up. We've got a men's panel coming up, which we have struggled actually to bring together a panel of particularly straight men as well, because it all comes back to that education and the fear to talk about it or to be, you know, put in a box. So really looking forward to that one. We have sex workers and pornography coming up as well. We've got a panel for all the safety campaigns to come together. And we've got a consent panel coming up as well. So we touched on that in May, but we want to go into it in more detail as well, because that obviously is such an important subject as well around safety. And then we will be ending, like I said, on the 9th of December with our live event, where we invite everybody to come together. And at that point, we will present our what if video. So all the what ifs will be shown, all of them, and we'll also at that point show everybody the paper that's going to go to Scottish Government, and hopefully be able to hand over at that point as well. And ideally we'll have some representation from the government there at the event. So yeah, if anyone watching wants to be involved, wants to share anything, wants to speak to us, please do get in touch, either through myself at One for Growth, Laura at Glasgow Girls Club, or Ashley at Thriving Survivors. And thank you so much to all our panelists and to everybody watching. We will be adding this to YouTube, again on the same 3 companies and charities we mentioned there, and sending it out to all our panelists to share. And the biggest thing for all these events is please share it, please continue the conversations. The more people talk, the less stigma there is around things, and the more education on all these subjects gets shared. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a really good, strong paper to go to the government. Thanks to everybody here.
Thank you so much for being involved.
Thank you.
Thanks.